Hello, this is great to see you today for our inaugural Ask the Expert panel meeting. Thank you for attending and submitting your questions already through to us. So we have our executive colleagues here who are primed and ready for your questions. They're going to be grilled, they're going to be sweating, so feel free to put all questions in the question box and I will select through those. Many of you have already selected and posted questions and we're going to tackle those first, but feel free to put through some more. So my name is Abigail Moriarty. I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor for Learning and Teaching and will be hosting this event. I am the Jeremy Paxton of the University of Sunderland. I'm going to go to each member of the exec to introduce themselves and we're going to then launch into your questions. So over to David.
Hello, I'm David Bell, the University's Vice Chancellor. Abby.
Now over to Michael. Now over to Michael. I think you're on mute, Michael.
Hello everyone, I'm Michael Young. I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic. Back to Abby.
And then over to John. John?
Hi everyone, I'm John Timmis. I'm Deputy Vice Chancellor Commercial. Back to Abby.
And then on to Andrea. Andrea?
Hi everyone, I'm Andrea Walters, the University Secretary and Director of HR. Abby.
And last but by no means least, Steve.
Hello everyone, I'm Steve Knight. I'm the University's Chief Operating Officer. Back to Abby.
I'm now going to hand over to David, who's going to do a brief introduction to the session and welcome all of our students. We have over 40 students here today, so thank you for your time. David.
Well, thanks again, Abby, for hosting today's session and good afternoon, everyone. Nice to have you all here with us today. Throughout the pandemic, we've tried to be as open and as transparent as we can be. In the midst of a global pandemic, of course, many matters have been outside our control. But we do think it's important to give as many opportunities as possible for people to ask questions. And I know many of you have availed yourself of the facility of submitting questions, not just today, but over the past 10 months or so. I would like to, at the beginning, just pay tribute to all of our students for their resilience and their forbearance during this really difficult time. And I think all of us have found this third national lockdown particularly demanding and difficult. As perhaps we'll discuss today, we've got some hope for the future, and we'll say a little bit more about that. But we don't want the moment to pass without acknowledging all the pressure that our students have been under, and I'm really grateful to you for your patience. I'd also say the same about the staff of the university, who I think have responded magnificently. So in the spirit, I hope, of friendship and partnership between the university staff and the students, I hope you're going to enjoy today's event. Abby, back to you.
Thank you very much, David. And actually, I'm going to come straight back to you and launch into the questions. And it's a challenging one. And some of these questions have been repeated more than once, so they've been brought together to actually get the essence of the majority of the questions. So for you, David, we have a student here who's asking, I feel that they're paying too much for their study as their study is via Teams and I've not had access to the campus. This isn't what they signed up to. This isn't what they were promised. Why can't you give these students their tuition fees back or a reduction? It'd be better for me if I went to the Open University. So quite a lot there, David.
Thanks, Abby, for the question, and thank you to the students who have put that question to me. I mean, perhaps just picking up my introductory comments, in the midst of a global pandemic, many matters have been outside the control of the university, and I'm sure everyone understands that. What has been in our control, however, is protecting the safety, health and well-being of our students. And that has been our #1 priority throughout. We followed all of the government guidance, both in this letter of the law, but also in the spirit of the law. And we've also made sure that we've taken the necessary precautions to ensure that when students are on campus, it is safe. And I should just say in passing that there is no evidence, and there has been no evidence of on-campus transmission of the virus. We've obviously done all that we can to maintain teaching, learning and assessment. And indeed, our priority has been to ensure, despite these circumstances, that students can progress with their studies, or in the case of final year students, complete their studies. I should also say that many of our courses are overseen by what's known as professional, statutory or regulatory bodies, and that's everything from teaching to engineering to computer science to nursing to medicine, pharmacy and the like. And therefore everything that we have done has had to be consistent with the guidance and the instructions that we've been given. On the point about, well, I could have been at the Open University, well, I have to say, of course, the Open University doesn't provide, even online, the very wide range of services that we have continued to provide: careers advice, well-being support, access to library materials, additional support to students who are in accommodation. And actually, the staff at the university here in Sunderland have gone way beyond what could be expected of them in providing the right kind of support for students. So I think that we have done much. It's cost us quite a lot as well to do it, but our priority is to ensure that you have been safe and well and have been able to continue with your studies. On the specific point of tuition fee refund, well, again, it's slightly misleading terminology, isn't it? Because the vast majority of students actually don't pay any money up front. And if there was to be any kind of quotes refund, all that the government could do is essentially change the conditions of your loan. So actually, there would not ever be financial compensation from a so-called tuition fee refund. And the other thing that I would say on this one is that even if the government decided to make a repayment change, it would charge the university for doing so. And therefore the risk is that at the very time that we are trying to put more money into supporting our students online and hopefully back to campus, we would have money taken off us. And I don't think that would be in anyone's interest. So I think in the spirit of the transparency and openness that I described at the beginning, we do not believe that tuition fee refunds are appropriate, and we will continue to provide the best support we can to our students. Abby, back to you.
That's great, David. Thank you very much. And I appreciate that some of our universities in the region haven't been so good in being able to manage the COVID transmission on campus. So that's great to hear that Sunderland's doing such a good job. So I've now got a question that I'm going to come over to Michael for, and it's about student feedback. So Michael, we have a question here where a group of students feel that their programme leader or lecturers sometimes don't listen or respond to their feedback and concerns. And the question for you, Michael, is there anyone else in the hierarchy I can talk to and find support? Over to you, Michael. You're on mute, Michael.
That's second time. Well, thank you for that question, but obviously I am disappointed to hear that kind of engagement that we would normally expect to happen perhaps hasn't happened, and we are right across the university very committed to working with students as partners in their own learning, responding to, listening carefully to their comments, responding and acting upon them. And I can think of many examples where that's happened across the university. So, and we certainly expect programme leaders and tutors to be part of that conversation and listening and responding to student feedback. So if that, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to be working, there are various routes, alternative routes. Obviously, you should have a course rep you can talk to, who you can work with and can help you. Also, there will be a student school coordinator who similarly you could talk to, and school coordinators are students and they meet regularly with their head of school, and that's a good way of escalating issues to the attention of more senior staff. But I would say that any student at the university should feel welcome and entitled to write directly to more senior staff at the university, and that could be the head of school, it could be the academic dean, and of course it could be Abby herself as PVC Learning and Teaching. And if you're not sure who your head of school is, or your academic dean, you can write to Abby at the email address she's shared with you, or you can look it up on the web. It's all there to be held. So I would encourage anyone who feels their voice isn't being heard to write directly to those senior staff. Back to you, Abby.
That's great, Michael. And what I'm going to do for attendees is I'll pop that email in the address, and feel free to contact me with questions or queries, or if you want to tell us about the fantastic experience you're having as well. It's always good to know about those. So my next question is for you, Steve, as the Chief Operating Officer. And this is that is asking again about fees, and you know, David's already identified why we are really inhibited or not able to, or want to return fees or refunds for our students, but what have we been spending money on at the university during COVID and pre-COVID, and where's the money being spent now? And there's a few questions that are popping up in the chat about accommodation refunds.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Abby. So in terms of spend, I mean, David has talked about some of the pressures that we've had, but we have been spending clearly quite a lot of our money on COVID related matters over the last year or so, and we're at the moment running at about 1.5 million of additional costs due to COVID, and that's a range of things: supporting students, accommodation refunds, which I'll come back to in a moment, supporting our catering operations and other operations. I think the question also talked particularly about buildings. We have actually managed to keep our building programme moving during the pandemic, continuing to build student support facilities and other academic facilities. We've got a £60 million 5-year plan. We normally spend around 14-15 million a year. We've kept that at about 10 million over the last year, and we've got another further development programme going on into next summer, building new anatomy facilities, midwifery facilities, moving photography to a new facility, etc., etc. So we have kept that moving. So the basic answer is that we are spending, in fact, more than we would normally spend to keep operations going. There is a page on the website that students can go to called Investing in Your Student Fees. I'm sure Abby can link that in after this, and we will be updating that for 1920 in due course. But that shows, for example, that 66 pence of every pound we spend is directly in teaching our students, and that hasn't really changed as we've gone forward, and indeed there've been additional costs. So we basically continue to invest. As David said earlier, protecting the health and safety has been paramount importance, but also the well-being of our students as we've gone through this pandemic. Abby, sorry, back to you.
Thank you very much, Steve. And I think what's really interesting from that is the amount of facilities that we've been able to pivot online, so our students are not been able to access, it's been able to access in a different way. And some of those interesting things that are coming through is very much about those online provisions. So thank you. So now's quite a specific question on to you, Michael, about resources. So there's a citation here from one of our students that says that module resources that are not available online and they can't afford them. Is there any alternative to those expensive sometimes resources? Michael.
Thank you, Abby. Well, yes, I mean, throughout this whole period of the last 12 months, we have prioritised when we could and where we were permitted to keep the libraries open and functioning, available for access to reading materials and other resources there. And we've really done our utmost to make those resources available to all students when we were permitted. And of course, that is the solution if the resources being referred to are actually in the library. There's two routes really. I mean, I think one thing is you could talk to your module leader, the tutor who's responsible for that reading list, and ask them the same question if you haven't already, because we do expect module leaders to make sure the resources they're recommending to students are available in some format. We would not normally expect students to buy books because we don't have them available in any form through the university. Another good person to talk to going via the library online help desk is we do have subject librarians in the library, and they are highly experienced in advising students directly with just these kind of issues, and know the subject, know the literature well, and can help you with that. It might be a question of an interlibrary loan if it's a very unusual text, or can advise you on alternatives. So they're two areas I think are definitely worth exploring, and students do this regularly, and it's fine. It's all part of the service that we want to offer to support students' learning. Back to you, Abby.
That's great. The subject librarians are such an important resource for us. So now moving on to a question to you, John, and this is a question about international students. So during the COVID pandemic, which is nearly a year now, how are the international students being supported on and off campus? Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks for that one, Abby. Thanks for that question. There's a few aspects to that, really. The first one I'll mention is around actually getting the students here. And so, because obviously it's been quite challenging over the last kind of few months for students to arrive. So our international team are working really closely with the students when they're still in country, making sure that they are kind of all up to date with their kind of travel arrangements, and trying to support them as much as possible to try and navigate what is quite a complex situation for them. And so we phone people up, we give them the support and help and the reassurance over the time. And we've been doing that even right now because we have students arriving as part of semester 2 at the moment. And overall, I think that's gone reasonably well, I think, trying to support the students in that way. For students that have been struggling to make travel arrangements, we've been advising them that our teaching staff, they understand, and that there are difficulties sometimes in just actually getting here. And what students have been doing is enrolling, and we've been flexible around the dates by which they can actually get to Sunderland. But the students are engaging online with the content to make sure that they don't fall behind. And of course, we are supporting some students who are still in their own country. China in particular is a good example, where we're actually using our Hong Kong campus base to support a number of students who were unable to travel earlier this year. And we've been sharing messages with the international students, of course, just like the rest of the student body, to reassure them that we've got staff available to help, both on campus with their accommodation and so on. And I'm sure, again, we can put the accommodation contact details in the chat if that's appropriate to do so. And it's also important to realise that we've been trying our hardest to make sure that students aren't going to be at any detriment as much as possible. And if students are concerned then obviously they should contact either their kind of course leaders, or they can go through the inquiry system that we have as well, which we can put the URL into the chat for as well, just in case people are concerned about any issues that they might be facing at the moment. Okay, back to you, Abby.
Thank you very much, John. And again, the resources that are being referenced here, they'll be circulated to you, so don't worry about that. Now, some of these questions that came in over the past couple of weeks were made before the Prime Minister's announcement on Monday, so there might be some different responses from these. So, but my next question is for Andrea. And it's about looking at students who want to use the library or go onto campus for face-to-face teaching, and they had to self-isolate and test back in January. Is this still the case now? Andrea.
Thanks, Abby. Yes, it is a very fast-moving situation. The current situation is still that any students returning to campus for the first time are still required to have received 2 negative lateral flow test results or have isolated for 10 days prior to coming onto campus to access buildings or any of our facilities. It is still really important that students who are attending campus follow these steps, and the university may have to take formal action if it becomes aware that students aren't following that rule. After the 2 initial tests, we do expect all students and staff who are eligible to be on campus to arrange to have a lateral flow test twice each week at the testing centre on Technology Park City Campus. It's really important that we all do this. Regular testing means everyone can be reassured that they are not infectious and that we can keep our university community safe. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you very much, Andrea. And this is a linked question over to now Michael that will have a different response today than it would have been last week. And so we have some students from FACE who are asking that why is only Group 1 courses, and Michael, you might want to remind us what those Group 1 courses are, have been allowed to have face-to-face on teaching on campus, and not the students in things like performing arts and glass and ceramics. So Michael, you've probably got a different answer today.
Yes, we've had some good news this week. Just to go back a little bit, the so-called Group 1 courses, medicine, a whole range of subjects allied to health, teacher training, social work, were deemed by the government, not by us, as priority courses that could continue with some element of face-to-face teaching, and so they did. We saw no reason why it had to be limited in that way, but unfortunately the government issued its guidance, which we, like all other universities, were obliged to follow. So I think the courses such as in arts and design and media that were affected by this, I think the staff have done as much as they possibly could to create an engaging, interesting, exciting term of online experiences, but undoubtedly everyone, students and staff, are deeply frustrated by not being able to access the facilities. Now, fortunately, that's going to change. So from the 8th of March, we'll start rolling out access to all the art, design, media facilities. Performing arts, for instance, will be able to start classes before Easter, and we'll have full access to studios for individual independent work for students in the faculty at the same time before Easter. And then after Easter, April the 12th, when the summer term officially starts, that faculty will start introducing classes in all other areas of practice-based subjects. And the same planning is now going on in some other areas like sport, where there's a necessary access to facilities, and they'll be informing students about their plans very soon. But it is good news that we're managing to introduce more campus experience into our courses again. Abby.
So that's fantastic news, and the Q&A function has gone mad because everybody wants to know, how will I know if I can come back onto campus if I'm a student in performing arts? So Michael, communications to students are coming out soon?
Yes, well, there'll be a university-wide message on email going out today, which will have a little bit more information around all of this. But the key information really is most likely going to be on your Canvas program page, where we expect bulletins to be put out, and timetables will also indicate for students who have timetabled campus classes. That will tell you that you should be on campus for a certain teaching event or workshop or whatever it is. So you could expect to have communication from the faculty via Canvas and also see it on your timetable. Abby.
That's great news. So the key message there is please look at your Canvas programme page. So moving on now to Steve, is that we have some questions about how we're supporting students, not just through COVID, but life beyond COVID. And how does the university support students that are financially struggling during their course? Steve.
Abby, thank you. So we have a well-established university hardship fund, which has been operating for many years. We have several hundred applications to that each year, with awards up to and around £600 or so. We supplemented that at the start of the COVID with a further amount of assistance funding, and we now have had government additional government hardship funding, which we're currently looking at how we distribute out. So we have been providing quite a lot of hardship funding, but again, if students go online, it was all documented about how you apply should you need it, and that is in place. I think I missed earlier when I was talking about accommodation refunds, Abby, so I'm trying to remember everything, but I can pick up on that now if that's okay. So we've been paying particular attention to students in our halls of residence during the last year. Clearly a big support package has been put in place for those who remain in halls, and recently we sent out some very clear leaflets as to all the packages we were putting in place. We supported students through Christmas, and we continue to do so. But we've also allowed students who want to get out of their contract to be able to leave their contract without penalty. And we have been giving refunds to students who, by nature of the government advice, cannot access their accommodation. Current refunds are up to 8th of March, but I can announce that in the communication, which is going out later today, we will be extending that to the 12th of April, which is the next step in the government's roadmap. And should that continue beyond that, of course, we will do that as well. So I think we've got quite a wide-ranging support package for students that also plays back to the hardship question. If they want to get out of their contract, they can, Abby. Back to you.
That's great, Steve. And in the chatter that there's some relief students, so thank you very much for that. My next question is for you, John, and it's about recruitment. So we have a question here about, has COVID, nearly 12 months on, impacted on our student recruitment? And are there areas that have been impacted more significantly than others? John.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. That's a really good question. And this is something that really challenged us back in March, April last year when the pandemic hit, and trying to kind of plan and work out what effect that would have on our student recruitment from September onwards. And initially back then, like nearly all the sector, we did plan actually for quite a large reduction across the piece in terms of our student recruitment, in particular in the international market, where we were expecting quite a substantial drop in international students coming to the UK. And also we expected a drop of our home recruitment as well. But what happened, actually, to cut a very long story short, because it was quite a tumultuous year last year with the exams issues going on and all that, what has happened is that generally we have performed better than we had predicted, and our international recruitment has held up actually to almost the same level as we did in 2019, 2020. So we're just slightly down, and our home student recruitment area kind of broadly increased a little bit. Actually, when you look at the UCAS numbers, we were slightly up. And overall, when you look at the student population this year compared to last year, then we are actually a little bit higher than where we were in 2019. So actually, the planning that we did around March, April, I think, and all the changes that we made to how we support students and our recruitment practice, I think made quite a difference to how it all panned out come September. In terms of, are there any areas that have been particularly hit, then it's very hard to pinpoint specific areas where we were more down than others. It was a little bit of up and down in most areas, as I might expect, but broadly across the university, our recruitment has held up, actually, and that is true in some institutions around the UK, but actually it's not true in all institutions around the UK. Back to you, Abby.
That's great, and I know we've got some London students on our call today and are particularly interested about London recruitment. So just a brief update, John, again, is our London recruitment, is that a similar picture, John?
Yeah, it is. And so when I was talking about the whole university, but London performed well again this year. And so again, we didn't really see the scenario that we planned out really hit us in the same way as we thought it might. So recruitment there has been strong and continues to be strong in London. Back to you, Abby.
Thank you for that, John. So now moving on to you, David, and we have got some questions in the chatter, and we've also had some questions come through already asking about graduation. So there's a question about why graduations have been cancelled for July, and another question is, when do you think we will have face-to-face graduations? David.
I mean, I'm as disappointed as everyone else would be about the decision to put off the July graduations. I think we did it for two principal reasons. First of all, it seemed to us that we had seen the behaviour of other universities and other organisations, that they just did not have the kind of certainty that they needed to be able to plan for graduations in early July. And as I'm sure everyone watching will appreciate, you can't plan a graduation ceremony in a week. It actually takes a very considerable amount of time to plan a graduation. Now, some people might have looked at the government's roadmap and said, well, I thought everything was due to be back to normal in the middle of June. Well, that's not quite the way it's been described, is it? Because actually what the government has said is that it will take careful decisions at each stage of the process, and it will not necessarily go at the speed at which the roadmap has outlined. It's also the case too, Abby, that not everyone in the country will be vaccinated by the end or at the beginning of July. The government's plans are, of course, to have everyone vaccinated now every adult vaccinated now by the end of July. But we just felt there were too many uncertainties there for us to go ahead. But there's another reason, and it comes back, I think, to some of the considerations around academic activity this year. If we are able to open up the campuses the way that was described earlier, there will be some students who need to put some extra time in, particularly if they need access to practical facilities. The risk for us was, if we tried to rush all of that because graduation was looming, there would be a good number of students that may not actually complete their programmes in time and be unable to graduate. And our decision was that it was better to ensure that students complete the work that they have planned to do rather than rush to a graduation ceremony. Now, to be very clear and for the avoidance of doubt, if students complete their programme successfully, they graduate from the university. There is no ambiguity about that. The graduation ceremony is a sort of public celebration of the fact that they've graduated, but everyone who completes successfully is a graduate of the university and can go into their job or their further study or whatever else they choose to do. The question of when will we be back in person? That's a good one. I can't answer that categorically, but we have a group looking at options for that in the future, and that includes representatives from the Students' Union. So the student voice is very much part of that. But I am conscious that there will be a group of students from 2020. There will be a group of students from 2021 this year who may not have had the opportunity, will not have had the opportunity to graduate in person. So we're thinking about what the options might be for such people in July 2022. Some people might think, well, it's not happened when I expected it, so I don't really want to go through a ceremony. Other people might think, no, it might be 2 years or a year since I graduated, but I do want to go through the ceremony. So we are looking very carefully at what we might do in 2022. As for the autumn of 2021, in other words, we hold graduations in Sunderland and usually in London. We're just planning or thinking about what we might be able to do in the autumn, but I cannot answer that question at the moment because as much as anything, Abby, it will depend on the shape and pattern of the virus and the unlocking of lockdown arrangements. Back to you, Abby.
Thank you, David. Yes, I think we are missing that crystal ball gazing to find out what's going to happen. So thank you for that. And now, panel, I'm going to go through some questions in quite quick fire because we've got some very good questions coming up on the Q&A. So these are, first of all, for you, Michael. So asking you, we have a student here who doesn't understand the special regulations. How does it apply to them? Where do they get their answers from, Michael?
Thanks. Yes, we do have regulations. We've actually had 3 sets of regulations since the pandemic broke out, not because we love writing regulations or bureaucracy, but because at every stage we've wanted to make sure we're doing the best for students. And the emergency regulations last year absolutely did do that. We've tested them, we've scrutinised what the results and outcomes were, and we're very happy to see that the grading safety net really did work in when used during the summer. So the special regulations are an adaptation of that, again, to take account of the change in circumstances in September when on-campus teaching started, and then again, but only for some courses, when the January restrictions were brought in. So they're the regulations that apply now, and your programme leader should be telling you which of the 2 sets currently in operation apply to you. The one set for the medicine, health, etc. I mentioned earlier, and another set for everyone else, basically. If you're not clear about what they mean, then don't be afraid to admit it. We all have to check that document from time to time. It's quite complicated. But the real message is that they are a means to ensure that you're not penalised as a result of any sort of negative impact that could have been over recent months. There's an FAQ page, and Abby can circulate that link from her email address. That's responded to various student questions in the past, and also the Students' Union have published a very good video of their take on it, which explains some of these core principles. So there is hopefully sufficient clear information out there. We try and write these things in as plain English as we can, but as I say, the processes can be quite complicated. Abby.
Thank you, Michael. I think the response there is don't be afraid to ask, because we have got the responses for you. Sometimes it just might be not as clear as we want it to be, but please ask. So I did say we're going to have some quickfire questions, but this is a quite deep and meaningful one for both David and Michael, really. And whoever wrote this really was wanting to get deep and meaningful. And the question is to both of you, and I'll go to David first, is what will the University of Sunderland look like in 10 years' time, David?
Well, Abby, after the events of the past 12 months, you might think it would be a very brave person who would want to predict the future. And so anything that I say has to have the caveat that circumstances can intervene. I think I'm confident, however, that the kind of university we are, with its very strong focus on careers and professional related qualifications, will be one that will be the case even 10 years down the line. I mean, for example, we've already seen a massive increase in applications for courses in the health-related disciplines. And I'm sure that's had to do with the last year's events, as people have seen the wonderful work that the health professionals have done. We've seen a very substantial increase in the number of students wanting to become teachers. And again, despite all the pressures of the past 12 months, teachers have responded magnificently. So those courses, plus the courses in the creative arts, the courses in business or law, the courses in pharmacy, nursing, you could identify virtually every course we are offering as the kind of course that will be attractive. And I think that will continue to be the case. Michael might want to say one or two things about the nature of the academic activity and how we do all of that. But I think just one other comment from me. I think that the University of Sunderland will continue to be an absolutely central and integral part to life in Sunderland. And people sometimes talk about universities as anchor institutions, and by that they mean the sorts of institutions that are there, they're fixed, you can guarantee that they'll always be around in the community. And I'm really confident that that will be a particular role for the University of Sunderland, a decades down the line. But Michael may wish to add to that.
Just very quickly, because I know we have lots of other questions. I think generally we feel at the moment like the range of subjects that we have at the university are a good fit for that role that David's described. We're always open to new ideas around how the subject offer could develop and expand. And of course, we'll continue to make sure our courses are current, regularly revising them and improving them in that way. I think in 10 years' time, I think we will have even more embedded across the university, all those industry professional links that really reinforce or support courses currently. I think we'll see that develop and extend, that really integrates the university into the region, but also on a national stage as well. And I think the reputation of the university is growing on the national level, and I'm sure that will continue. And of course, behind all of that is sometimes it's not obvious until it's happened, but there's a capital plan for investment to enhance buildings. Currently, we're looking at the libraries, we're looking at technology and other areas. And of course, all that takes time to put in place. But I think over the next 10 years, all that investment will continue as we make sure our resources are up to date and high standard. Abby.
Yes, we're going to be formidable now and in the future, undoubtedly. Now, a question over to you, David, and we've got two parts to this, because we've got a question from Georgios, our sabbatical officer from the Students' Union, asking a question similar. So my loaded question was, how does the university view its relationship with the Students' Union? Could it be better? And the follow-up from Georgios is saying, is there any examples where the university and student union have worked together for our students? David.
Well, thanks for that question, Abby, and thanks, Georges, for that question. I'm delighted that it's been posed because actually I think we have got an excellent relationship between the Students' Union and the university. I think we've worked at it quite hard, particularly in recent years, to ensure that the university obviously is working well for the benefit of its students, and the Students' Union is working for the benefit of the students. And together, I think we get better value in working together. Now, that doesn't mean that we always will agree on everything, because a Students' Union is independent of the university in that regard. But we have a relationship where Student Union presidents will speak very frankly, and we will respond frankly, courteously as well, and with all the information that we require. But we try to minimise the number of areas of disagreement, and where we think we may be slightly at odds, we then try to find solutions. And I'd want to pay tribute to the Students' Union, particularly this year. I mean, if it's been hard for the university, it's also been hard for the Students' Union. And I have to say, students at the university, they have been incredibly well served by their Student Union presidents. A lot of the time, you might not see what they're doing up front and visible, but behind the scenes, they have been making such a powerful contribution, whether it's on providing good feedback on the regulations, whether it's been working with us on student mental health, whether it's been thinking about climate change, an important issue that hasn't gone away just because of the pandemic, a whole range of different areas where that has happened. And I can point to specific ideas and initiatives that have come from the Students' Union. Cashless car parking on campus, which we're going to be rolling out. A system and scheme to give students even better support in their use of language and writing for academic purposes will be introduced. And that came actually from a very specific suggestion that Georges, as one of this year's Student Union presidents, made, as well as working with us on student hardship and connecting with students during lockdown through the work that Chris Davison, one of the other presidents, has done to ensure there's a good range of activities. And then Giorgio Quintos, the president for welfare, done a great job with staff at the union and with us on supporting mental health. So, Abby, there's a huge number of areas where the Students' Union has done a great job for students. And in the end, the university and the Students' Union have the same purpose, and that is to make the experience of our students the very best it can be. Abby, back to you.
Thank you, David. Yes, the relationship with the Students' Union just goes from strength to strength. So, Georgios, I hope that answers your question on the chatter. So my next question is to go over to you, Steve. And we've got some questions about supporting students that are on placement. And the specific, and it's a very specific question, is that so some placement students were told that the university can no longer support them with travelling expenses, something that was clear since the first year. Why has this changed? Or Steve, has it?
Well, thank you, Abby. I think I need a little bit more detail on this question. I've discussed this with colleagues ahead of this session, and we're not exactly sure what it refers to. So I think if we could take this one, if we could take this one after the meeting as well. But what I can say is that we are currently reviewing both the Get You Here scholarship and the having conversations with Network Rail about travel in the region, and we're having conversations about placements and students travelling to placements. So all that is being discussed at the moment as our numbers of placements grow. So if I could get a bit more detail from whoever put this question in, I will provide a full response on that in due course. Oh, sorry, back to you, Abby.
Thank you, Steve. And again, I have constant communication with school coordinators and the student union. So if there are specific issues that you feel that you want to have discussed, then please just let your school coordinator or myself know, and we will get back to you as always. So now moving on to another question. And again, Michael, this is for you, and it's about probably the holistic impact of the pandemic. It's not just about being on campus, but we have some students reporting that they're needing wellbeing support, and the pandemic has negatively impacted on them. As a university, how can we provide support for these students?
Thanks, Abby. And of course, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm sure it's true that for most or many of us, this has been a hugely challenging period that challenges us, not just at work as a student, but also in terms of our resilience, our mental resilience in such challenging circumstances, where we haven't been able to engage with friends and family, for instance, as much as we would. And it's very important that we all look after ourselves. And one of the most important ways to do that is not to hesitate to ask for help. So that's why we have a team of advisors in the student wellbeing services whose job it is to work with students. They're a friendly bunch, and they like working with students, helping them address the challenges that they're individually facing. The place to start is on the website, unsurprisingly, and Abby can circulate that link. There's all kinds of guidance about wellbeing and mental health. There's some tools there to have a go at and have a look at. And of course, that's a portal into getting arranging meetings and support directly with human beings working in wellbeing services. So I would encourage anyone who has some concerns about their state of mind or how they're feeling, not to hesitate and to get in touch and see what help's available. Abby.
Thank you, Michael. And yes, the range of resources that we have available is really extensive, but we have got that virtual face-to-face contact as well, and that's available for students and not to be alone or isolated, but to reach out. So the next big question that we have sent through prior to the event is for you, Andrea, and it's about communications and about information getting to students, not just about the pandemic, although that has been a hot topic of conversation. But we've got some students saying that, you know, the university sends some long generic emails, and that is there any way that these very long generic emails can be more meaningful, or how are the students to filter out what's for them on their course or not? Andrea.
Thanks, Abby. And of course, we use a variety of ways to get information out to students regularly, and that's been so important over the last few months. All students are strongly encouraged, and I know this has been mentioned this morning already, to look at the Canvas programme pages for weekly updates and for very specific course information that's relevant to them. For general information, including the latest news, case studies, articles, guidance, advice, we also thoroughly recommend looking at the About Us regularly. That's our student SharePoint page. And again, that includes quite a lot of information in a quite succinct and very relevant and up-to-date format as well. So hopefully, I'm sure that for those students who don't like reading the long generic emails, and of course it's important to do that because they can often contain important details, but there are other ways and sources of information that we will use as well. Thanks, Abby.
That's great, thank you. So now I've got some quick fire questions for you. So the first one, Michael, is for you, and the question from a student says that they're experiencing on their online lectures is that some staff are not recording their lectures, and this is quite frustrating, particularly when they want to revisit these sessions, or sometimes maybe their connections aren't great at the time. So Michael, so Review is our lecture capture service. What can we say about that? Michael?
I think it's a very similar point to what we discussed earlier about not being afraid to escalate. That means raise with somebody else if you have an issue. Certainly ask the tutor if it's possible to record it, which it is, and ask them to record it. There might be on occasions a reason why it's not appropriate, but they are very much the exception. And again, as I mentioned before, discuss that with your school rep or your course rep, or drop a note to your head of school. It's a perfectly reasonable expectation. And one of the reasons we introduced the recording technology, which we did some time before the pandemic hit, was exactly for that reason, so that lectures and seminars could be recorded and watched again later. So I'd absolutely encourage you to raise that with staff in the faculty. Abby.
Thank you, Michael, and again, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you you want to remain anonymous or you don't want to actually have that discussion, but our academics are very welcoming and they do want to hear your feedback. So my next question, hot off the press, is for you, Steve, and this is from our sabbatical officer president for activities, Chris, and he'd like to know how the students can get involved in the redevelopment of campus and investment programmes. So how will our students' views be represented when we're making improvements to the campus? Steve.
Thank you, Abby. Well, we've paid particular attention to this over the last couple of years, particularly having student engagement groups on all our projects, having students actually on our project groups. And even this morning we had the new main library project group, and Georgius from the Student Union and a Student Union rep, I think from London, were both on the group, involved in the conversation. And I know that Abby actually is leading, as part of that project, a student engagement group, which is looking at what the library should look like going forward. So that's the sort of engagement we're now getting. We've done a lot of work around this with in the FACI project group as well, and they've been working closely with students as to the redevelopment of that faculty. So they're just a couple of examples of what we've been doing. So we absolutely value the student view into these projects, and we will continue to do so. I was also relating this morning that when we refurbished all the catering, I went round and looked at other universities' catering operations, and a member of the group that I took around was a student union president, and we toured around and looked at other universities. So we are at all stages trying to get the student voice heard on the projects. Back to you, Abby.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, and I'm always up for a road trip. So the next question is lots of different questions that have come from London. And appreciate time is pressing. But we're receiving some feedback that London is growing. There's lots of students. What about the resources that are in London, and how and what's the plans really for London and that experience, particularly regarding the social element and student union element for London. So I'll start with Steve. Yeah.
Okay, Abby, thank you for that. I can pick up on this. So the London campus, as was mentioned, is very successful, growing enormously. So we are currently looking at taking some more space in London, in Canary Wharf, where we're going to build some additional teaching and other facilities. Then, as part of that overall project, we are going to again upgrade some of the social and other student spaces in the main campus building. So we're very aware that it is become quite a crowded building in places. So there's a large amount of investment going to be going into this, which should all be ready by around August this year. Abby, was there a second part to the question there I've forgotten as I was? No, would that cover it? Okay, back to you, Abby.
Thank you, Steve. And I just want to bring Michael in here because obviously our academic and our teach and learning provision is so important at London. So Michael.
Yes, it is. I just wanted to add to Steve's comments that with the student growth at all times, we've also managed staff growth. So we put various new academic appointments in place to help the team there, and that's working out very well, and that will continue just as the student growth continues. We also now have an academic plan for the campus, and first evidence of that is one program, one of our biggest programs there in business, that went through a very significant revision, very much working with students in response to student comments, and that's proving very popular with the new cohort. So that kind of work will continue in the future. Abby.
That's great news. So, Steve, have you got anything else to add?
Yeah, I think there was a part to your question about student union representation in London, Abby.
Yes, that would be great if you could pick that up.
Yeah, so we are currently discussing this with the students' union. They've made a proposal for additional representation in London. So that is going to be discussed over the coming weeks, and given the size and scale of the operation there, I think we'll be looking at it quite favourably going forward. So more to follow on that, Abby. Back to you.
That's great news, Steve. And yes, and my thanks to the London campus student coordinators that have been so important to developing our relationship with London. So this is the last question panel, and it needs to be truthful, it needs to be from the heart, and it needs to be pithy. So somebody wants to go back into your past, and the question is, if you could go back in time and talk to your university self, whenever that would be, what would you say? So I'm going to start off with Andrea. Andrea, what would you say to your university self?
Apart from don't dye your hair blue on your graduation photos. Yeah, I'm still horrified by that. I think it's really, you're still young, you still don't know everything, even though you may feel like you do. Use your time at the university to create a lifelong passion for learning, push yourself, develop your ambitions, listen to others, try new experiences. And if you get the opportunity to take a work placement aligned to your subject, absolutely do it. It's a great way to open your eyes to new careers and ultimately make you more attractive to employers. I think that's the advice I'd give to myself and possibly others. Thanks, Abby.
I can't imagine you with blue hair, Andrea, but that is a photo to share at some point. So I'm now going to go over to John and ask him what he would tell his university self, and I'm interested to know whether there was an afro. John?
No, there wasn't, but I did have a ponytail, but that's another story. There's all these bad photo opportunities are coming out, aren't they? So when I was at university, actually, I was a mature student, and I was actually retraining for a new career. I'd actually started life as a chef, as a classically trained chef. So I'd already told myself partly that there's no point doing something that you don't enjoy, sort it out and go and do something else. So I did that. But if I went back to myself when I was doing my computer science degree, which I went back to do when I was older, I think I would say, don't be surprised where you end up, because it probably won't be where you think it is. And for me, life's been really interesting. I feel very lucky to have ended up where I am doing this job. I never thought I'd be doing it. I mean, I loved programming and designing software. That's what I loved doing. And I assumed I'd be doing that forever, and I'm not. So yeah, don't be surprised where you end up would be my statement to myself.
So a ponytail, John. I think I'll swiftly move on from that and go over to Steve. So Steve, what would you tell your university self?
I think what I would say is that the world will change beyond what you ever will expect for the time you get to sort of my age. And if I'm just looking back to those early days and looking at what's here now in front of us and what's likely to come over the next few years, you need to be adaptable. You need to think about the long term. You're going to live longer. You need to pace yourself, that sort of thing. I think the world in another 50, 60 years will be totally different to the world it is today. Back to you, Abby.
It's very deep and meaningful. Now, this is a response that I'm interested to hear from my boss, Michael. What would you say from your university self? And obviously keep it clean.
Always. Well, we've had such excellent advice there from my colleagues about making the best of every opportunity that comes your way and taking advantage of things, even when it feels quite tough and demanding to do that. I guess in my first degree, I was a bit of an anxious student, and I'd probably say to myself now, you know, stay calm, stay focused. No matter how challenging it seems, you know, you'll thank yourself in the years to come when you feel so much more resilient in dealing with challenges that come your way. And I think that's probably good advice for a lot of people right now, given what we've been talking about today. So nothing more to add there, Abby.
Those are incredibly wise words. And now I'm going to hand over to the VC, and this is our last question to the panel. I just want to thank all the participants for the questions that have popped up. I will endeavour to get back and to respond to those if we've not had the chance to answer them today, and I will be reaching out and say, how did you find today? But finally, over to you, David. What would you tell to your university self? And please close the session today with my thanks.
I think I would remind myself, Abby, of the need for balance, balance, balance. There were occasions where I think it would be fair to say that I was a bit too focused on the non-academic side of activity, but there were also occasions when I was too focused on the academic side of behaviour. And therefore I suspect that the best way through, and I hope that this is true for our students, is that they achieve a good balance between focusing on their academic studies, but also enjoying other aspects of life as well. Abby, thank you very much for your excellent chairing. You got us through a whole bunch of questions there, and you didn't hold anything back. So that's, of course, thanks to our students for not holding anything back and asking us some great questions. I hope that there will be information that you might not have heard before, and if so, we'll make sure that we put up the links that have been talked about. And as more than one of us have said throughout this session, please ask. I think we would even be nervous about being described as experts ourselves, but there are certainly many experts around the university that would be more than happy to help. So thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thanks very much.